So we're going to talk to Wes, who is from the UK, and we've clashed in tweets and also discussed in DM a little bit. Wes, how are you doing? What's your question today?
Hi, Katy. What I wanted to discuss, you might have seen on my, I just posed a little question there, trans women, gatekeeping and safeguarding. Now, there's a lot of people don't have an issue with trans women. And
Right.
I think a lot of the discussions which have been had primarily on Twitter, which I've seen, it's just basically shouting matches, and it doesn't really advance the situation one iota. I have a problem in that people are just basically speaking over each other in this situation. When we talk about trans women, people have different ideas what a trans woman is. As far as I'm concerned, a trans woman is somebody who's transitioned or is in the process of transitioning, i.e. taking hormones, having surgery and so forth. What I've seen in recent years, particularly with certain organisations, namely Stonewall in the UK, up until 2015, they had nothing to do with trans people. In fact, they used to deride trans people, and they were not very sympathetic to trans people. Since 2015, since they've achieved all the LGB issues culminating in gay marriage, that was basically the zenith and the high point of their achievement. Now they've taken on the trans issues, which I haven't got a problem with. But the problem, what I have got, is that the umbrella of what it means to be trans is so broad. An organisation like Stonewall, they're basically now saying that a trans woman is now somebody who just cross-dresses. A trans woman is somebody who does drag at the weekend. And that person, because they call themselves a trans woman, is then afforded the same rights as being a woman. This is not a question of hating anybody. You can do what you want. You can identify as an animal. You can identify as a chair. You can do
that's not quite the same, though. Yeah, I heard what you're saying.
Not exactly the same.
Let's not derail into that.
I'm a liberal person, so I'm basically live and let live. But the issue arises that when somebody says they are trans, and you said it yourself a couple of weeks ago, not everybody transitions for the right reasons. There could be bad reasons. And when people point this out, they're automatically dismissed as a bigot or the transphobic and so forth, which I don't really think is very helpful, because as you pointed out a couple of weeks ago, not everybody transitions with the best of intentions. So the main example I'm going to refer to...
Hey, Wes, let me get Wes in there. So
the main example
so there's a couple of points here. Hang on. You've raised a couple of points, so let me address your points as they come up. When we're talking about like what is the definition of a trans woman, like lots of people love to have this definitional argument, and I think that for a lot of people, maybe it's just interest. For a lot of people, they've got some kind of fear about some situation or whatever, and it's driving that. Some people just love to argue. And I think that there's times when we can have this argument. And one of them was when we're having some kind of philosophy discussion, like what is the true meaning of woman? What is the true meaning of trans person? And that is kind of interesting. But for me, it's not something I really care about. What I care about is legal rights and practical like living conditions of the people we're discussing. What I want is every single person in the whole world to have a safe life and have equal access to, freedoms and protections.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, I'm not saying you do. That's a good general principle that like 99% of people are going to agree with. So a lot of people agree with it. At least 50%, I hope, will agree with that principle. But we then have the situation where we say, well, we know that a group, trans people, are face this irrational prejudice, and there are lots of groups that face this. Gay people do, people of color do, for all different reasons, from all different things, but there are these big general prejudices that people face, and transphobia is one. And we can say transphobia is an issue, it is holding back trans people, and that's a true enough statement to get like a discussion going. And then we can say, well, currently there are laws which are stopping trans people from doing certain things, and currently we're missing laws which are necessary protections on top of base level rights, because of the extra prejudice these people face. When we start looking at these laws, that's the point at which it's worth discussing who these things include. So for sure, we can have this like hypothetical discussion about, oh, you know, I've imagined a person who says they're a woman every other second on even seconds, and they're a man on odd seconds. Like, what do you think about that? Like, I don't really care, because what I'm trying to do is come up with a law which is going to combat transphobia, and what I also want to do is combat the laws which, like, systemically encode transphobia. So when we're talking about, like, who is a woman, like, absolutely that can become a situation where we need to like, for example, when we're talking about women's spaces, which is one of everyone's favorite topics that we're not at all sick of talking about. And the classic example here is toilets. And I know that it's not all the same, and we've got lots of different areas that we can talk about, but we can say, what are we going to do? How do we decide who's a woman for going into the toilet? Well, it turns out there's like 3 different ways of policing this. We can either have society deciding. So the people around you, if there's a room with 10 people there and you walk into it, they're all going to make up their mind about whether you're a man or a woman or anything else. And maybe there'll just be some consensus and they'll act on it. That's like option 1. Option 2 is you have some kind of legal check, some kind of document process, some kind of process. And then number 3 is the person themselves decides. And that, like, policing situation that we have, there's only those 3 options, and they're the only 3 options we have in any context. Now, that can be toilets, that can be prisons, that could be applying for scholarships, that could be who's allowed to count as a woman for winning Jeopardy. In each of these cases, we don't have to pick the same 3, the same decision of those 3 for every single context, but we do have to pick one of them for every single context, because they're the only 3 options available. So when we come to something like toilets, this is a bit of a long description, but I just want to give you the full position on this. When we come to something like policing toilets, we have these 3 options. Let society decide, have a document check, let the person decide. We can look at the pros and cons of each. Possibly none of them are perfect. I mean, we still are going to have crime. We're still going to have sexual assault. That's going to happen regardless of which one of these options we pick. We want to minimize harm for all the people involved, everyone.
Well, absolutely. If I could just interject.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, can I just finish my thought? Because I'm very close to the end.
Yeah,
hang on a sec, Wes. For toilets,
okay.
I think that a document check is completely unreasonable, because that would be like showing your passport to go to the toilet. And having some kind of society consensus sometimes works, and it's maybe traditionally worked in some places, but it just gets to the point where you have to perform being a woman to a certain standard, and usually that ends up in gender non-conforming women being called men and harassed. And what we have legally in the UK today, and have had for our entire lives, all 3 of us, is the 3rd option, which is the people decide, and that, at least in the context of toilets, is working. So we can have this argument like, oh, they're saying anyone could be a woman, but okay, but let's just pick one context, toilets. We can pick another one if you want, and say, what is the situation today? What is the problem? And which of those 3 options are you saying to switch to? And let's do the pros and cons. And I would argue, for the toilets context, it's easy. The 3rd option, the self-ID option that everyone hates, is just plainly the best one. But yeah, so that's my first addressal to your first point. And you were just going to add something there? Oh, actually, wait. Before you do, Wes, can we just let Steph talk in? Because you've talked loads and I've talked loads. Steph, do you want to add?
I think that it's interesting that everybody's got an opinion as to what constitutes a real, quote unquote, you said real trans person.
Yeah.
Specifically real trans woman. And how do you know, I guess would be my question. How could you possibly know what goes on within another person's mind? Like you mentioned, wait. If I could just finish my thought, Wes, you mentioned cross-dressers, for example. For a lot of people, there's a tremendous amount of fear in coming out as trans because of how they were raised, because of the circumstances. They were taught to think that this was bad. Or, many trans people feel more comfortable in clothing that is more appropriate to the gender they feel internally, right? So that's one step on the road. Are they, quote unquote, just a cross-dresser? I mean, at what point in time do they become real trans people? And isn't that point in time up to them not up to you.
Yeah, who's making the call on that, I guess?
Well, I have an issue with that. Hello?
Okay, you do.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Go for it, Wes.